All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at a pretty wild contrast. On one hand, we've got the chaotic, explosive, almost unbelievable rise of the aerospace industry over the last century. And on the other hand, we have the highly regulated, deeply community-focused reality of modern aviation infrastructure today. It's a fascinating story of boundless ambition up in the sky, meeting the very grounded realities of the Earth below.
Here's our flight plan for today. We'll be covering the dawn of flight, wartime production, space race consolidation, boom and bust, modern airport infrastructure, and finally, consulting communities. Let's get to it. Section 1. The dawn of flight, early aviation.
If you look at the MIT Labor Aerospace Research Agenda, you'll see the early industry was definitely not the slick corporate machine we know today. We're talking about a total Wild West of innovation. It was driven by individuals just trying things out with a super haphazard structure. They were quite literally making up the rules while they were up in the air. And this timeline really captures that crazy pace. We go from Samuel Langley's model aerodrome in 1896 right to the Wright brothers in 1903, all the way up to 1918. And my absolute favorite example of this trial and error era, in 1918, they inaugurated the U.S. airmail. Lieutenant George Boyle takes off for the very first route and promptly flies 25 miles in the exact wrong direction before having to crash land. It just perfectly sums up the ambitious, yet totally unrefined nature of early flight. Moving on to Section 2, wartime production, labor and industry boom.
What's fascinating here is how fast aviation went from a novelty where guys were flying the wrong way to a massive, highly structured military-industrial complex. The numbers are just staggering. At the peak of World War I in 1918, the U.S. delivered about 14,000 planes. Fast forward to November 1943 during World War II, and there were literally 1.46 million Americans employed in the aircraft industry. Overnight, out of pure wartime necessity, it became the largest manufacturing industry in the entire country.
But the big takeaway isn't just the sheer volume of planes, right? It's the huge societal shift that came with it. Think about this. By 1943, out of Lockheed's 94,000 workers, almost 35,000 of them were women. That is roughly 40%. The absolute desperation for aircraft completely rewired the American labor force, bringing women into advanced manufacturing roles on a scale nobody had ever seen before. Of course, working at that breakneck, high-stakes pace led to some incredible and honestly kind of funny stories. Back in 1949 at Edwards Air Force Base, Captain Edward A. Murphy was looking into a totally botched experiment. He found out that all 16 sensors had been installed backwards. His response? He coined the phrase, if there are two or more ways to do something, and one of those ways can result in a catastrophe, then someone will do it. Yep, that is the literal, factual origin of the famous Murphy's Law.
All right, Section 3, space race, Cold War consolidation.
The real game changer hits in 1957 when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik. American labor leader Walter Reuther actually called it a bloodless Pearl Harbor. It was a massive wake-up call for the entire country. So what did the U.S. do? They rapidly scrambled, consolidated their fragmented research, and created NASA in 1958. And this intense, laser-focused push paid off just a decade later in 1969 when a Saturn V rocket blasted the Apollo 11 crew right to the moon. But we have to remember this kind of boundless technological leap comes with a seriously skyrocketing price tag. Just to put it in perspective for you, a single fighter plane in World War I set you back about $5,000. By the mid-1970s, the tech had gotten so unbelievably complex that a single fighter plane surged to a whopping $5 million. The financial stakes were climbing right alongside the altitudes. Which brings us to Section 4, boom and bust, mergers and decline. You know, an industry built on that kind of aggressive expansion is absolutely guaranteed to hit some crushing bust cycles. And the early 1970s were just brutal. Commercial jet sales plummeted 68% from their highs. Boeing had to gut its workforce, dropping from 105,000 down to just 38,000 people by 1971. Someone actually put up a famous billboard on Highway 5 that read, "Will the last person leaving Seattle turn out the lights?" It's a dark joke, but it perfectly captured the devastating local reality of an aerospace bust. The ambition was up in the sky, but the economic crater was right there on the ground. And that reality check brings us to a major pivot in today's explainer.
We're talking about the shift from that unbridled build-at-all-costs mindset of the 20th century, where everyone just wanted to go higher and faster, to the highly deliberate, grounded reality of the 21st century. Today, the challenge isn't really getting planes up in the air. It's how we accommodate them back down on Earth. And that requires intense consultation, assessment, and mitigation. Let's see what that looks like in Section 5, Modern Infrastructure, Burbank Expansion. We're going to use the Hollywood Burbank Airport's replacement terminal project as our case study here. Just to get up to modern FAA standards, Burbank proposed a massive logistical undertaking. We're talking a 355,000 square foot replacement passenger terminal, 14 gates, and a 413,000 square foot aircraft ramp. You have to handle demolition, new parking, new utility plants. They are essentially building a small city within a city. But here's the catch. Unlike the old days where you could literally build a plane in a bicycle shop and fly it out of a field, pulling this off today requires an incredibly rigorous process. The FAA has to prepare a massive environmental impact statement, or IIS. That kicks off with extensive federal and local scoping meetings, like the ones Burbank started back in 2019. Every single potential environmental impact has to be identified, heavily documented, and laid out for the public. And this leads perfectly into Section 6, Consulting Communities Respecting Culture. This is perhaps the most crucial theme of our explainer today. Expanding modern aviation demands deep, respectful consultation with the communities whose land is actually being impacted, specifically Indigenous communities. During that Burbank EIS process, the FAA initiated formal outreach to the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Kij Nation. They are officially recognized by the state as the Aboriginal tribe of the Los Angeles Basin. And doing this outreach isn't just checking a box. It is legally and ethically essential to make sure their ancestral territory and cultural resources are protected way before anyone even picks up a shovel. So following this structured process, Chairman Andrew Salas of the Carrijack Nation formally requested an AB 52 consultation. That's a specific California law requiring lead agencies to sit down with tribes to discuss impacts and figure out mitigations. What this proves is that today's aerospace industry can't just stare up at the clouds anymore. It has to legally and respectfully anchor itself to the heritage of the ground it actually occupies. So, having tracked a century of wild innovation, insane wartime booms, and the meticulously regulated present, here is the ultimate question I want to leave you with. As we keep pushing the boundaries of flight, and maybe even push further out into space, how are we going to make sure that our ambitions in the sky never outgrow our respect for the Earth, the environment, and the communities down below? Thanks so much for joining me in this explainer. Keep looking up, but never forget what's right beneath your feet.